Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to look at part three of the West, looking at the Plains Indian Wars. And some of the big topics we can think about is, remember, we have all these groups that are out there um, on the plains. So those Plains Native Americans, the Lakota Sioux, and Dakota Sioux, so different two tribes that are out in the Dakotas and Minnesota, going down to parts of Nebraska. We have Blackfoot and Cheyenne, Crow and Comanche, all the groups that are out there. And even as people were going west in the 1850s, we started seeing reservation policies come in. So we go all back to 1851, something called the Treaty of Fort Laramie, gave these tribes big reservations. Okay, huge reservation thing, get off the area, go to big reservations. But some tribes disagreed. Some tribes said, nope, not going to do it. Obviously, however, eastern tribes were relocated to what we'll call Indian Territory. And this is going to set us up with what's called the Indian Wars. And so we'll see a lot of things happen with the Indian Wars going forward. As far as conflict between the white settlers and Native Americans on the plains. And people like Sitting Bull and General Custer, all these different guys, as part of this whole thing. So the early conflicts we have is going to include things like Sand Creek Massacre and Red Cloud's War. And it's just topics we're going to go through as we look at this here. And as part of this whole deal, we hold the kind of some of the first issues we have. And as people move west, a lot of times for gold, we'll start in Colorado first. And in Colorado, we have what's called the Sand Creek Massacre. So Sand Creek, Colorado, you have both Cheyenne and Arapaho who are camped in Colorado. And the idea there can move from land that settlers want to prospect gold on. And so Army comes in, and the leader, John Chivington, says, this quote of, damning Indians, kill and scalp them all, big and little. And so the U.S. Army ends up basically massacring this camp of Native Americans, women, children, everybody, and a lot of people get killed here in this process. Going to kind of our next step as we see these conflicts get bigger and bigger and bigger. And as people gone west, there was some trade happening with Native Americans. Guns become bigger, badder. We have repeating rifles that fire faster. And a lot of stuff gets traded back and forth with Native Americans. So not only do Native Americans have arrows and bows and those kind of things, but also adding guns to their arsenal as well. And really, it's going to be a conflict over land. As Native Americans being forced reservations and told land being bought up by farms, military posts, all that kind of stuff. They're trying to keep their land, keep their livelihood. And so a lot of these unfair treaties are what's happening, where you trade goods and lands, and unfair trades and scandals with Indian Bureau and all this kind of things happening. The Native Americans are going to lose over 90% of their land as this process goes on. And so, we talk about some of these issues where attacks happen, where, you have settlers and a few settlers in some railroad areas being attacked. And one famous one called the Fetterman Massacres, where you have a guy named Fetterman leading a group of civilians and military escort on the Bozeman Trail heading up north to the Oregon area, and they're attacked by the Sioux tribe with Red Cloud and Crazy Horse as their leaders. And so you have this group that's attacked, and so now it gets to be an issue of what we're going to do about it. And so the U.S. response is to send in the Army. They grab Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, the guy up here with the lovely blonde flowing locks, and he was a very young general in the Civil War, and was brought back down to a peacetime rank of colonel. And so they take 1,500 guys over 100 forts to keep peace over 2.5 million square miles. It's darn near impossible for this to work out. And so the Army is just really, really stretched thin. And so the goal is trying to make peace with these tribes and try to stop the violence from happening. And we have our second treaty of Fort Laramie that comes out of this, which is the agreement between the Sioux tribe, especially, and the U.S. government. So they're going to give this reservation here in South Dakota, and the Black Hills, which are sacred to the Sioux tribe, is being there as well. And the idea is that you're going to have this land forever, hunting grounds, all that kind of deal. So a couple of the groups sign it. Sitting Bull and his group never signed it. The Oglala group signed it, but they said that they'd have their traditional hunting grounds that are outside the reservation as well. So kind of sets up a really bad situation going forward. As tribes do sign treaties, they don't like the reservations. They don't like being stuck in these groups. And we start seeing a few tribes even refuse, trying to stay on their sacred homelands. And so this even leads to U.S. aggression in some places where Phil Sheridan, who was a Army general, goes after the Comanche in Texas. And the Comanche tribe had attacked U.S. installation stuff for 6 years. And so he kind of, brought friendly tribes together. He attacked all the other tribes that were there. He killed warriors. He burned villages, killed horses. He gave no quarter to anybody. So if you were captured, you were hanged. Women and children were captured. And basically all resistance were crushed here, and the Comanche basically wiped out part of this U.S. aggression. It happens. Now, things are going okay until 1874, when gold is discovered in the Black Hills. Now, the Black Hills are sacred to the Sioux tribe, and so all of a sudden now, all these people are moving into the Black Hills and kind of taking over. And so it leads to our next big issue, which is going to be a massacre or border battle. So as more and more people move in, the Sioux tribe was like, hey, what's going on here? We can't do this. They have to move out. And we have, conflicts happening between the settlers moving to the Black Hills and the Sioux tribe and other groups as well. And Sitting Bull, the leader of the group of the Sioux tribe, kind of gets these tribes together in Montana next to Rosebud Creek. He does a sun dance, and a sun dance is a ceremony where he will do special chants and cut him and put sights on his body and dance all day and eventually see visions. Okay, a lot of times tribes do visions to see what's going on and to see visions of what their future is going to hold. And so he does this sun dance. He cuts his arm over 100 times and has this vision. What he sees in his vision is white men falling on the Sioux land, and the men are upside down. They're falling off horses. And he says, "What does this mean?" Well, this means that if we fight, we're going to win. They're going to die. And so we come up to the Battle of Little Bighorn. So this is where you have Colonel George Custer and his Army cavalry and scouts and friendly Native Americans who are fighting with him, and they fight next to Little Bighorn Creek. And the group is massacred by the Native Americans. They have a small force of less than 500 people taking on 2,000 people, mostly because Custer thought there were a lot less Native Americans out there. This has been shown in paintings and movies and everything else, but it's called, Custer's Last Stand. You go to the cemetery today, you can find where all these guys are buried. Now, this Custer's Last Stand, which we'll talk about in class more, is the U.S. biggest military U.S. feat ever, where over 200 soldiers are killed, mutilated. It's printed in papers, pictures are published, and the huge embarrassment of the U.S. Army that the most advanced army in the world supposedly is getting beat by Native Americans, and that's not good. And so the U.S. Army sends all these extra troops in. Even more troops are being sent out there, and a lot of the Sioux Native Americans are arrested, taken to the reservations. Some of the leaders try to escape to Canada, so Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse actually go up to Canada near the border, and we kind of see them try to get out of the line of fire that way. Eventually, Sitting Bull is brought back to the United States and placed on the Sioux reservation, and he's kind of watched by the Army and the Sioux police, and eventually he'll be shot by a Sioux policeman who thought he was going for a gun, and he'll die on the reservation that way, killed by a police officer. So by 1880, most of the stuff is done already, and most of the Americans on reservations. And the situation for reservations is not good. I mean, tons of poverty happening there. You're told, go become a good small farmer. Well, the land you're given is second rate. You have bad equipment, second rate seed. You can't really grow anything. A lot of disease, a lot of poverty, lack of sanitation. Honestly, things have, and some acts of biological warfare with things like, blankets being given from sick wards and that kind of stuff. And a lot of the Americans are dying on these reservations. And when it comes to Sherman, who was generally Army, kind of, has the idea of scorched earth, right? The biggest thing is they took away all the buffalo herds, which means Native Americans can't go anywhere else, and basically by getting rid of the buffalo are forcing them to become farmers this way. The last story is that of Chief Joseph from the Nez Perce tribe, and he's out in Oregon, and he had conflict with settlers over here in his traditional homelands. And what happened was, as a tradition happens, he's being chased up by the Army, a conflict with the local settlers, and he basically takes his people and tries to escape to Canada. So the green line is where the Nez Perce tribe basically kind of fight this running battle trying to escape from the U.S. Army, and this group is mostly women and children, not a lot of warriors. And even Joseph himself was not a warrior. He was kind of the peace chief, if you will. And this whole group eventually gets up here to the Bear Paw Mountains, right up near the Canadian border, where they eventually stop. And as so many people are dead and sick and wounded, Chief Joseph issues this phrase, "I will fight no more forever." And it's kind of this symbolic deal showing that, the Indian wars are over, the Native Americans are done, there's no way they can try to keep going, and we're going to fight no more forever. And we're going to basically be finished, and we've kind of been ground down over this whole process. And so it leads us then to Helen Hunt Jackson, who writes this book called Century Dishonor, talk about how the U.S. has basically pushed Native Americans out and caused these issues. And so really there's not sympathy for Native Americans, but also in that book Helen Jackson talks about how ending Indian culture and kind of bringing Christianity in through boarding schools and that kind of stuff, and how while Indian culture is gone, we need to start teaching them that way. So we're talking about that a little bit, as well as how Native Americans try to bring back and kind of resist where they're at now. Reservation life is a picture. This is not great for people. You see the army kind of surrounding Native Americans. They're trying to live their natural life on land that's not theirs. Things aren't theirs. As we said, lots of poverty, lack of sanitation, lots of problems going on. And lots of problems are happening by 1890. There's a last glimmer of hope of something called the Ghost Dance movement. It's done by a Sioux shaman who's doing something called the Ghost Dance. And the Ghost Dance, you use the power of your ancestors and get special powers to kind of be invincible. And so the U.S. government had broken up a lot of the assimilation, the reservations. Some land had been given to the whites. The land is really terrible. The Sioux can't be farmers, and it's all issues. And so this Paiute Indian does this dance, and it brings back your ancestors. The idea we're going to restore things to the way they were before the white man came. And you wear these things called ghost shirts, and this is a ghost shirt right here. And as you wear this shirt, it's supposed to make you invincible to bullets and those kind of things. As you wear these, you'll be invincible, and you'll be able to take back the land was once there. So the army's like, I don't know if I like this or not. It's kind of a bad situation. Afraid of that, the Ghost Dance will do a rebellion, okay, on the reservation. As I said before, they think Sitting Bull's a part of this, and so they go to have him arrested. And as Sitting Bull is elderly guy is being arrested, a gunfight starts up. He's killed by a Sioux policeman trying to apprehend him. This is the adventure at Wounded Knee. The Wounded Knee, South Dakota, is a spot where you have Spotted Elk, who's a Lakota chief. He has 300 Sioux there who had fled after Sitting Bull's death. They're stopped by the army, surrounded, and they actually have on the hills around them these small artillery guns called Hotchkiss guns. And so this medicine who's there, army's all surrounding him, tries to get the people to put their ghost shirts on and attack the army. Well, the army is talking to people trying like, hey, give up your gun, give up your gun. Just arm the people and say, let's come back to the reservation and try to figure out what we're going to do. Well, in the process of trying to disarm the Sioux, a shot rings out. Nobody knows who actually fired the first shot, if it was a Sioux person or if it was a soldier or if a gun accidentally went off. Who knows what happened? But a shot went off. And all of a sudden, all the soldiers around the circle, this group started shooting into the group. And so the army opens up on these big guns and with small arms at point blank range. And it was a massacre. And a lot of soldiers started shooting into the group. And so by the time all the smoke clears and this is done, 150 Sioux are dead. That was 24 soldiers. A lot of soldiers are actually killed by friendly fire as the soldiers are surrounding this group of Sioux and shooting into the crowd. All the soldiers' bodies are picked up, but all the Sioux are left to sit in the snow. And you have a lot of pictures of the aftermath of Wounded Knee because all the Sioux are left to lay there in the snow and freeze. And so there's a lot of pictures of this. Eventually, the U.S. Army gives money, gets them in graves, but it's really the last event of the resistance. There's really not much after this. I mean, it's published in newspapers. A lot of these actual soldiers were first given huge honors and commendations, but eventually they were punished for firing without provocation. So, kind of very controversial issue that happens at this time. Now, last part of Indian policy, we're going to talk about something called assimilation policy. This was the government encouraging Native Americans to become more like Americans. So instead of being nomadic and communal, go to the idea of being a yeoman farmer. And the Dawes Act can be a part of this. Indian schools will be a big part of this. And the goal is to help them fit in. What's going to happen is you're going to see a lot more Indian land be lost to people in Oklahoma and the Black Hills areas. The tribal bond shattered, the whole basically tradition of Native Americans getting put away. And just remind you guys that Native Americans are not citizens yet. They're not actually guaranteed full U.S. citizenship until 1924, so it's still considered to be some kind of thing in between. They lose tribal status and nation status in 1871, but still aren't considered citizens yet. So they're kind of in between two worlds at this point. Harry Dawes, this guy here, is supposed to be quote-unquote friend of the Indian, and his goal is to change them to that more American-like lifestyle. And so assimilation, we try and make somebody turn culture, and so their goal is to turn Native Americans into Anglo-Americans by changing their clothing and making them farm and all that kind of stuff. And the biggest way this were through boarding schools where children were taken from their tribes and their parents, sent to boarding schools to teach them how to be white people. A lot of this was run by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which was supposed to run these schools, make sure that they're okay. And so a lot of land's taken apart. Land that's not being used is sold to white people. So this is Oklahoma, where you have the Sooners who come in and grab Native American land that's not being used right now. You see farmers who are trying to become citizens, that kind of stuff. Your goal is you're given land, you gain land for 25 years, you became a citizen. This Dawes Act really hurt a lot of people economically because they couldn't keep with technology. The land splintered, sold to whites. And that assimilation policy is not really working as you go further, and a lot of the land that was there is sold off. We'll talk more later. Thank you.